Chapter 13 of Social Media Marketing 63 to 66 examines how to monitor social media so that you can get to that all-important ROI and know where your efforts have been effective and where they need additional work, modification, adjustment, and tuning. So when you listen and you track, this is where you begin to understand what, how many, who, and not only with your target market, but also with your efforts. So I think sentiment analysis is very popular, as is brand mentions. And you can do a brand mention when you're listening. A brand mention search is pretty strong, pretty useful. You can also pick up keywords. I don't know if you've ever had keywords tracked by Google Analytics, perhaps your last name or the name of a family member who's out there doing things. We see this a lot, personally, people doing this personally. You want to be sure that you're using search terms that are not necessarily aspirational, but more likely to be appropriate. So if you have a little coffee house called the HBU Grind, then you'd probably want to track, quote, HBU Grind, close quote. That would be an example of an appropriate search term. Hashtags remain very popular, but you have to be very careful how to use them. For example, here it talks about the World Cup being the most tweeted event of 2014. But then, of course, it was held in Brazil, right? And that's Brazil with an S. We spell it with a Z, but locally it's spelled with an S. And when it's referred to, it's usually in its local language. So it's important to track the right things. This is an example of the California tortilla, show us your hot sauce face. And you'll see how they've repurposed and used this. So the hashtag here is, well, obviously, hot sauce face, which is hilarious, right? So, and good color, it's a very simple deliverable, right? And then, of course, these are the instructions that go with it. Show us your hot sauce face, and it gives you the instructions on how to do it. So what they were doing is getting consumers to engage with hot sauce face, and therefore with California tortilla, right? Okay, so measuring involves, it says it's no longer optional because it used to be, and now if you're not measuring, you're not going to get anywhere with your investment, right? So measurement allows you to understand how you're doing, how your chosen strategies are working out, and how to tune what you're doing. But there are a lot of ways of measuring, and there's actually a table in here that I'll share with you that's very helpful. So when we talk about metrics, we're talking about measurements. It is a metric. So what is a metric? So for your course, your metric would be probably your grade. For your degree, it would be your GPA. For your fuel usage, it might be miles per gallon, or it might be number of miles driven, or it might be the percentage of all hours of your travel that are spent driving as opposed to on your bicycle or walking or whatever. So a metric is a number. The goal is, where are we going? We want to increase the number of people who come to the truck, the amount of money that is made, how many people visit us on Thursdays at the museum, whatever it is. And the strategy is what you're doing to achieve that goal that you set. And then finally, your business objective. That's the measurable step that you take. We're going to spend this much. We're going to commit to this many impressions on Facebook, that kind of thing. Then your KPI is the metric that you determine actually measures how your efforts impact and help you get to your business objective. KPIs are used by businesses around the world, and KPIs are critical. There are always 1 to 7 KPIs at a company that they look at to see how they are doing. So if they want to grow by 5% by the end of the year, there are metrics that will, if they go up, they know they'll hit that 5%. Okay. And of course, the return on investment. You're familiar with that already. After all, you were in grad school. Okay. So you need to choose the appropriate metrics based on your objectives. So how might we measure that California tortilla campaign? So the objective might have been how many likes they could get on each Facebook post, or the number of shares, or maybe the number of shares on each Instagram post that had to do with show us your hot sauce face, or the number of pictures that got posted on Instagram, because obviously there was the Instagram icon there, so you knew that's where they were going with it, right? So figure out what your metric is going to be. And then you can determine how effective this was. Now, we talked about Instagram, but this is actually the California Tortilla Twitter page. So they used the same image and the same idea and the same hashtag, but they used it in a different place and they adjusted it a little bit. So it wasn't exactly the same message and the same statement, which is real smart, right? It's not, you can't just take the same thing and plaster it on every platform. It has to be unique. This is the kind of metric you might adjust. The Clout score, the NPS, the Net Promoter Score. Under influence, under exposure, you look at page visits or unique visitors. You've heard this before. Cost per thousand, depending on what you're buying. When you're in online retail, you look at the percentage or number of abandoned shopping carts. They looked, but they didn't buy. They left and went somewhere else. That happens a lot at department stores, for example. And then finally, you look at those KPIs to get to your ROI. So in this case, you're looking at your business objectives. In this case, it was to increase e-commerce sales by 10%. And so they had very specific social media objectives: new visitors to 20%, and to increase conversion rate of visitors, all visitors, not new visitors, all visitors, by 3%. And then these were the business metrics and the social media metrics and the KPIs. And the KPIs are the ones that were determined to actually influence this business objective, which was to increase e-commerce sales by 10%. So best practices, so what? That's critical. If it doesn't make sense, if you say, so what? We're going to measure this. So what? What does it mean? What does it tell us? How does it help us? If it doesn't, even though it may be a really cool analytic, drop it, right? And make sure also that your contact, your liaison, is able to use them and willing to use them. You don't want to do all the work and have them say, this means nothing to me. What I really need is. That means your communication early on was not quite as effective as it should have been. Identify the metrics that drive results and choose them as your KPIs, your key performance indicators. Dashboards can be as simple as a list. It can be a memo. It can be an email. Dashboards are usually kind of pretty, but you don't have to use them, certainly for your project. In the real world, dashboards are very helpful because everybody can see the information that is critical to them. And then, of course, you want to communicate with managers who are using this information and meet with them to discuss what has been learned and how it was effective. So I'm going to transition from what you're doing on your project to what you're going to do in real life. So this is chapter 13. This is monitoring social media marketing efforts.